You know, I know there was an old saying about, it's a Native American saying about walking a mile in someone's moccasins. And of course we made it walk a mile in someone else's shoes. But that's not really what the video is quite about. I stuck some old sandals here just to have a visual, because I'm not good at video editing. I wish I was, and I thought, well, maybe one day some man will come and be like, oh, I love you so much, I want to make your videos for you. But that hasn't happened, and chances are high it's not. But I try to at least give you some substance in the videos. So what I want to talk about is love. You know, the way you love someone. And when you're in a relationship with somebody, you know, you tend to start knowing little things about them. And the longer your relationship is with them, the more you pay attention to things. And eventually, you know, you end up knowing what they would say or what they would do, you know, in certain situations, you know. And sometimes if a situation arises and you're not sure, you'll say, well, oh, let me consult with my husband, or let me consult with my wife, and we'll discuss it and we'll see. You know, because sometimes you need that other view, because it's something that you're not familiar with and you're not sure exactly how that person's going to react. But eventually, you get so you do know after you've been together a lot of years. So what I wanted to say to you was this: how well do you know Yehoshuah? You know, how well do you really know him? You say you love him, you proclaim you love him, but how well do you really know him? You know, did you pay attention to some small details about him that you didn't realize or recognize? There are some things there that everybody misses, and it blows me away sometimes. I think, well, if you love him so much, why do you miss these things about him? They're very important. They're a part of his essence, in a way. And by recognizing these things, you see things you didn't realize, and it opens up things to you more by seeing these things. So you're thinking, what is this old hag talking about now? Well, it's something very simple. Your love for him, how much do you really love him? You say you love him, but what did you miss about him? Is there anything? Can you think of anything you missed about him, something very important that you didn't notice or take notice of? Well, I'm going to show you something about Yehoshuah that you never saw. Most of you never paid attention to it or recognized it. But those of you that really love him, you probably have checked it out, or at least saw a part of it. Well, let me point it out to you, since you maybe don't see it. Yehoshuah never taught scripture. What? Yes, he said, Pay attention. He never taught scripture. The only time he quoted scripture was when he was tempted by the puppet, when he was tempted with scripture by the Pharisees or the rabbis or the priest. The only time he touched on Scripture was he would say, "Well, you have heard it said." He, moreover, elaborated on Scripture, or rather condensed Scripture and brought its meaning to head. But as far as saying, well, the Torah says, that never happened. The Scripture says, that never happened. He said, it is written. But he never, ever, he read the Scripture in the temple one time, but he wasn't teaching. He fulfilled a rabbinic type thing where they had to come in and quote a Scripture. You're like, what? Oh, sure he did. No. Only when he was tempted. And typically it was in response to the temptation of Scripture. This is why they had a problem with him, because if they could have that saying about New Age, in their eyes he was some New Age person coming teaching, not teaching the Scriptures. He definitely touched on the Ten Commandments. He definitely touched on that. But for the most part, he taught parables. Or he taught the kingdom of heaven. But as far as sitting on the mount teaching Scripture, that he didn't do. Go back. Look at it. Look at it closer. He did not teach Scriptures. He taught the kingdom of heaven. He taught in parables. It doesn't show anywhere where he tempted us with Scripture. He never tempted us with Scripture. Those he was teaching, he never tempted them with Scripture. Now there's one that came later that tempted with Scripture. But he taught you the love of the Most High. He taught you to seek him with all of your heart and all of your soul and all of your mind and all that you are. He spoke the words that came out of the mouth of the Most High when he was tempted by the puppet, as I call him. But he never tempted us with Scripture. He elaborated. He brought forth a conclusion. But quoting Scripture is not something that he did to us. He only quoted Scripture when they tempted him with Scripture. Did you know that about your love? The one that you love so much? Go back. Check it out. Was he your first love? Have you left him? For someone that wants to do the research on this, you know, he didn't set up 7 churches. He was not the father of 7 churches. However, he did know 7 churches would come to exist. So in Revelations, when he speaks to the 7 churches, pay attention to what he speaks and says. I tell people that have lost their way, I say, just go to those 7 churches. Look at everything they did that keeps the Spirit there, and then look at what they do that'll take the Spirit from them. People don't understand and realize that him speaking to those 7 churches was actually his response to 7 letters, or 9 letters rather. 2 letters written to 2 churches. It was his response to those 7 churches' letters. If you look closer to what he said to the 7 churches, you'll see that the one thing he has against them is the counter to the one thing taught in those letters, that tear that was put in those letters. Let me give you an example. For I have one thing against you. You have left your first love. That was the response to follow me as I follow the Christ, the Jesus, the Messiah. That was his response to that. I bet you didn't see that, did you? How well do you know your love? How well do you know Yehoshuah? Are you sure you really love him? Or do you love your second love? You know his name. Why do you continue to cheat on your first love with Paul? Why is that? Apparently, does he have more money? Apparently, the kingdom does. Perhaps that is why you can't focus on the first love. Yehoshuah. Yehoshuah, you are my first love. Because you brought me to our Father, our God. Holy is the living Yehoshuah. Praise you, Father. Praise you for Yehoshuah.